Hey, good morning, folks. Yeah, it's about 9:04 on this Wednesday. I don't have to be at work till later on this afternoon, almost into evening. But I want to talk about something now. Occasionally, I would watch Mike and Mike in the Morning, which is on ESPN, and they get replayed during the morning hours. Traditionally, they come on about 3 o'clock Pacific time in the morning here live because it's a live broadcast. Excuse me. Because it's a live broadcast, they, do 3 a.m. in the morning. When I used to live in Kansas, it'd be about 5 a.m., so it wasn't that much of a big deal then, but still. Anyway, uh, they had a little segment they just did where they were answering questions, and it was like something about, it was a Shove It or Love It segment. And one fan asked a question about the addition of three new bowl games to the college football bowl season. I'm guessing starting this upcoming year, if not next year, or this upcoming season or next season. And all three, both Mike and Mike agreed they loved the idea. They loved the concept of now having basically 42 bowl games. And one thing they addressed was how some people, because, excuse me, one thing they did address was how some people don't like, they don't like the idea, excuse me, they don't like the idea of the fact that they, how do I put this? They basically discussed how some people don't like the idea that college football, the NCAA, keeps adding bowl games and bowl games and bowl games every year, if not every other year, for the upcoming season or seasons. And one thing that both addressed, in fact, Greeny said it best, Mike Greenberg said it best. He said that basically, and they both agreed on it, it's a reward for a lot of the young students that play college football. It's a reward for them. It's a reward for the school. It's a reward for their coaches that are but it's a reward for them for basically having a good season. Now, another way people can look at this, and I think, some people should understand this is another reason. There's a lot of schools out there from mid to mid majors, small majors, to the power conferences that basically you can have a record of 500, basically a 6-6 record, if you will. And like I said, you can have a 6-6 record, but there have been numerous times, even this past season, that you can have a 500 record, if not maybe a little over 500 by being 7-6, and still not make a bowl game. Excuse me. And like I say, still not make a bowl game. And by not making a bowl game, you know, essentially, you're saying to that school, yeah, you got a winning record, but guess what? We can't take. But unfortunately, we're obligated to this, or this was the first team that we invited and they took the offer, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of disappointing for that school, and it's disappointing for its students. It's disappointing for the student athletes that play for the football team. So it's basically a very disappointing venture for them. However, the NCAA, despite how you might feel about them, they see they see this problem here, and they're like, you know what? It's unfair. Someone there in the NCAA offices says, you know what? It's unfair that all these other schools that have these decent records, 6-6, 7-6, heck, 8-5. It's disappointing that they're not getting a chance to show why they got that record, why they had such a decent or good season. So that's why you have the addition of bowl games that's why you have the NCAA every year or every other year decide for that upcoming season or the season that comes for that upcoming season or the seasons that come after it. This is why you have the NCAA always deciding, okay, let's add another bowl game, or let's add a few more bowl games. Because it allows those teams to be rewarded. Like I say, you could be a power conference team, a powerhouse conference team, and still not be rewarded. Take a look at Florida. Yeah, name recognition and all that. But they could have not had a bowl game this past year. What did they do? They saw, I think, what was it, the Birmingham Bowl or something like that, said, hey, we want you. They could have rejected, say, no, we're above that. No, they took it because at least they wanted to show why they had not the best year, but they had a year worthy enough of being in the postseason. That's why they took it. They could have said no and allowed a smaller conference or mid-major conference team to do it. They said no, we want to show that we, despite our season not being the best, that we are deserving of being here. That we've worked our butts off to be here. And that's what a lot of teams do. A lot of schools and their teams do. Despite the location of the bowl game, despite the venue it might be in, despite the date and time, if a committee, if a committee for that bowl game reaches out to you and says, hey, we want your team, despite you not having the best record, but you having that 500, if not a little above record, of course you're going to take it. You're going to take it right off the bat because you want to prove to the world that you deserve to be in the postseason despite the season you may have had. And that's what the NCAA sees. They see that a lot of these teams out there that have had 8-5s, 8-4s, 7-5s, 6, 6-6. They see that a lot of these teams have been eligible for the bowl season, but have not been invited. Never got that opportunity to prove why they earned that eligibility. So that's why you have the NCAA create these new bowl games. This is why you have, as they mentioned, as Golick mentioned this morning, this is why you have the Tucson Bowl in Arizona. or the Arizona Bowl in Tucson. This is why you have the Cure Bowl in Orlando, and to be in whatever bowl game it is down in Austin, Texas. Excuse me. I'm trying to get over a cough here. You know, this is why you have the NCAA adding these bowl games, and maybe going to add more down the line, because they see that there are teams that have worked their butts off, to be bowl eligible, yet they never get that opportunity. It's kind of like, let's take a look at the NCAA tournament, the basketball tournament. Originally, it was not a bracket of 68. No. It wasn't a bracket of 68. You know why? Because you take those 8 teams away, and it was a bracket of 64, am I right? Exactly. Then, sometime after that, when it was just originally the bracket of 64, they decided, let's make it the bracket of 66. Alright, fine. Then, they decided, let's make it the bracket of 68. And now you might say, well, why would they do that? When mainly the 4 games, well, actually, what was it? I'm trying to think. You have 2 teams playing to face the number 1 seed, 2 teams playing to face the, okay, you have 4 teams on different regions playing to face the number 1 seed as the 16th seed. And you have 2 others playing to be the number 11 seed. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, basically the round of 68, and what was originally, I think, just a round of 61 or 62, 63 or something like that. Basically, you added 8 more teams to a round of 60. Originally, I think it was 64 teams. I mean, basically, you had 32, you had 32, you had, it was basically originally, the NCAA basketball tournament was a 64-team bracket, originally. But then they expanded and said, let's go 66. Yeah, it's because, why did they do that? Because sometimes there'd be teams that would basically have identical records and would win their tournaments, their conference tournaments, and it's to get to the big dance, and yet they originally only one could. So basically, the NCAA, they saw a problem there. And yes, with the addition of newer conferences coming into Division I and all that, blah, 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 they decided, you know what, we got to give more teams opportunities. And that's why they went from 64 to 66 to now 68, and maybe even more so in the future, because they realized there's a lot of conference teams, a lot of teams out there that win their conference tournaments, or who have earned who have earned the right to be in the NCAA tournament, but can't really fit in there because there's only room for one. And, like I said in a video earlier this year, there's only room for one sacrificial lamb to the number 1 seed. So, that's an example right there of the NCAA opening the doors and giving more opportunities to schools to fight for something, to play for something. The same could be said for Major League Baseball and the NFL. I remember back when Major League Baseball, it was just, the Championship League Series. two of the best teams from both conferences would face each other, and then after that, the two best teams from those leagues would face each other in the World Series, and that was it. Down the line, they decided to add the divisional playoffs. Why did they decide to add the divisional playoffs? To give three other teams, or two other teams, an opportunity to fight for that right as well. Then, sometime later on, they decided to add the wild card aspect to allow two additional teams to fight as well. And they basically used what I consider the bracket of NCAA. Basically, the two teams that were in the wild card would go on and face the team with probably the best or second best record in the league. And that's what would happen. Thus, it opened the door for other teams to have opportunities. Even if that team won the division, it would still give them an opportunity to go out and say, hey, we deserve to be here. Or, well, not win the division, but at least have that playoff eligible record to go out and say, hey, we deserve to be here. We are the best. Kansas City Royals, San Francisco Giants last year are a good example. Both teams got to the playoffs, but both teams were wildcard teams. And in the mindset of a lot of people, a wildcard team is not going to really make it that far in the playoff system, even if they win the wildcard game. Well, both teams proved everybody wrong. They got to the World Series and had a classic. They had a classic. Thus, proving the point that by opening additional doors and giving additional opportunities to other teams, you're giving them a chance and a spotlight to showcase why they've earned the right to be there. The same with the NFL. I remember when the NFL was just like one wild card game from both conferences. You already had a divisional round game done or set and ready to go, and you had just like what MLB is doing now, Major League Baseball is doing now, or did last year, and I think it's still doing. You had one wild card game, and the winner of that wild card game would face the best or second best team from that conference. So let's say, for example, you would have the St. Louis Rams facing the Dallas Cowboys, and the winner would go on to face Seattle or San Francisco. I say Seattle because, yes, they are a good team at times, and I also say San Francisco because, of course, that's my hometown team, or my home state team. So, let's say, for example, you have the St. Louis Rams and the Cowboys facing each other in that one wild card game to face either the Niners or the Seahawks, whoever has that best record, right? So let's say it's Seattle. The winner goes on to face Seattle in Seattle. You are giving that team of St. Louis and Dallas, those teams, that one last shot to go forward and try to win that championship. You're giving them that opportunity. You're giving them that opportunity to do that. So by giving them that opportunity, you're saying, show us why you deserve to be here. And that's what they're doing. And that's why the NFL decided to add an additional wild card game to the playoff system. So that way you don't just give two more teams, that way you don't just give two additional teams, but you give two other additional teams, along with that, a chance to fight for a playoff, fight for a